right, thank you, everybody. My name is Carrie St. Pierre. I'm the Executive Director of Farming Forward. I'd like to welcome you to What a Waste. We're talking about on-farm waste, from animals to plastics to the government regulations. And I'd like to thank all of the people who have come today in person and joined us here with the coffee and the snacks. And I'd like to also thank everybody online, all the way from Saskatchewan to northern and southern Alberta. So thank you and welcome. I would like to thank our speakers as well for coming today. Assar Grinde and Jason Moodie and Louise Liebenberg, thank you. And they'll be providing us with as much information as they possibly can, and we're hoping to be able to answer a lot of questions as well. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Assar Grinde.
Hey, good morning. Can you guys hear me online? Yeah, they're good. Okay. Deanie will just get it set up. Yeah, so my name's Assar Grinde. I'm a cow-calf producer from Ponoka County. And I was on the board of the Alberta Beef Producers for a couple of years, and I'd passed a resolution back then about what to do with my ag plastics. And then when this all started, they kind of voluntold me that I was the rep, and I've been there ever since. So that's why I'm here. I'm not with Alberta Beef Producers anymore, but I'm still their rep on the ag plastics group. So yeah, that's kind of how this all started. Was when I first came home to the farm in 2012. We use a lot of silage on our farm, and our local landfill for a few years just stopped accepting all ag plastics. It was interfering with the cycling in their landfills. And so they just said, deal with it on farm. And unfortunately, a lot of people started burning it, and I just refused to do that. It's actually against the regulations in Alberta. It's illegal to burn plastics because of the air pollution, like the dioxins and furans and cadmium and mercury that come off of it. And that stuff bioaccumulates both in the soil and in fat. So I just chose not to do that, and I started stockpiling it on my farm. And so this is when I take a strip off my silage pit, I just would roll it up. That's just how I did things so it wasn't blowing around. And I'd put it on the ground with a tire on it. But after like 4 or 5 years, I actually had like a fence being built out of silage plastic. And I thought, this is crazy. We need something to do other than this. So at a fall producer meeting, as a beef producer, I put a resolution forward that said we should lobby the Alberta government to look for a permanent solution to ag plastics, because the ag plastics are super important for us as farmers, right? Like they make our feed production last longer. They're really important, but the reason why they're so valuable to us is also the problem is because they last forever. Like that plastic, that we don't know how long it takes for it to break down. So at the same time, we passed a resolution that the Alberta Beef Producers, the Association of Alberta Agricultural Fieldmen, the rural municipalities, some of the other recycling groups in the province, some of the other commodity groups in the province, they were all having the same issue with, like, what do we do with this big bulky volume of ag plastics? And so they had passed the resolutions as well. And so we decided we should have a meeting and get together. So all those different groups got together, and we said we should form a formal group with some baseline principles and bylaws. And we formed the Ag Plastics Recycling Group. We had representatives from academia, Alberta Environment, Alberta Agriculture, rural municipalities, the ag fieldmen, all of the different agricultural commodity groups in the province, as well as some of the manufacturers of plastic, some of the retailers and waste commissions. So we got together. And that was in 2017, we formed the APRG. And then through 2018, we did a lot of fact finding. Like, we got presentations from other jurisdictions all around the world, Ireland, New Zealand and Australia, some of the American states. Like, what do you guys do with your ag plastics? What's the best way of managing it? We got presentations on different models, like stewardship models like ARMA, and then some EPR models. And we thought, well, Alberta, we're our own special circumstance. We should probably have a pilot project to, like, just explore the circumstances in Alberta. So we applied for a grant for a pilot project for collecting ag plastics for recycling in then we got approved right away, which was great. In 2019, we hired a third-party contractor through an open process, and that was Clean Farm. So we hired them to operate the pilot program. It rolled out in the fall of 2019, and then it's been going ever since. So it started out with like 21 collection sites originally. It was only supposed to go for 3 years. We've had one extension, and we've actually put in an application for another extension because it was supposed to end 2025. But we don't have a permanent program yet. So there's an extension request in with the government to take it to the end of 2027. So that's kind of where we are right now. And this is my boilerplate. I have to say this anytime I'm presenting. So the pilot project in Alberta is called Alberta Ag Plastics Recycle It, and it's funded by the Alberta government. That money is given to Alberta beef producers to act as the administrator. ABP is the one that writes the checks. Clean Farms is the third-party operator, and then the APRG is the oversight body. So we're the ones that kind of direct the Clean Farms in what direction they should do, or better communication or whatever. So one of the first things that we did during the pilot in 2019 was got Clean Farms to commission a waste characterization study of what sort of plastics were we using in Alberta and how much. And so you can see the big three are grain bags at 20%, twine is 22%, and then silage film, which was my big concern, is also 23%. And so at the time, we decided that we'd just select grain bags and twine as the two to include in the pilot. They both are very easily recyclable. They had recyclers taking the material, and then there was also a developed market for that resin that the recyclers were producing to sell. So, and they're also two of the three big uses in the province. So that's why we decided to choose those ones. These are the collection partners that we have right now, and this is as of March 31st of this year. The green, that was the first year, so there was 21 that joined, and then each year you can see we've been adding new partners. This is a voluntary program, right? The municipalities or waste commissions have to want to be part of the pilot program. This is a map of the collection partners, 52 partners. They're spread out throughout the province, and then each collection partner, like a municipality, might have 3 or 4 collection sites. So this is a location of all of the different collection sites through the province. There's pretty good geographic distribution. There's still a couple holes, like in the special areas around Brooks, from Two Hills up to Athabasca, there's a bit of a hole, and then kind of around Peace River and Manning. But a pilot project wasn't ever meant to be 100% full coverage. That's what a permanent program would do. So we have pretty good coverage, and they're always willing, like if the pilot goes for another 5 years or something, like any municipality that wants to participate can get in touch with Clean Farms. So our Alberta collection totals, this is up till the end of June of this year. We've collected almost 4 million kilograms of grain bags. So that's almost 20,000 grain bags that have been kept out of landfills and sent for recycling, which has been really good. Grain bags, I think, are the easiest plastic to recycle just because they're such a huge bulky item and they're used up all at once. It's not like you're taking a little piece of them at a time and then the farmer doesn't want them around, so they want to get rid of them. Twine is a different story. Like we only have 623,000 kilograms and collected so far. 57% has been from hay processors. They usually use the bigger square bales, so the twine is that big ropey stuff. It's pretty easy to take off, and they go through a lot of it. So they really like being able to collect it and send it for recycling. And then the remaining 43% was from individual farmers bringing it into their landfill or for recycling. This is just a comparison slide. So this is a quarterly collection totals. So first quarter from 2022 to 2025. You can see, so for grain bags, it goes from a low of 72,000 kilograms in that first quarter up to, it was 120,000 kilograms in the first quarter of 2025. And it varies year to year. And that's mostly based on the previous year's crop production. So when you have a really big year, more people are using grain bags, and then you'll have more grain bags to recycle the next year. And then for twine, you can see the first year there was a little bit more, and that could have just been some legacy material that farmers had stockpiled. But then the remaining years since then, there's, I think, been slow, consistent growth. Part of that is every time we bring on a new hay processor, that's like a big jump. And then this year, you can see the first quarter of 2025, there's a huge jump, 68% increase. And I think part of that is probably due to the Great Twine Roundup competition. I don't know if anybody saw those advertisements, but that was specifically targeted to 4-H and to youth, just to try to encourage more people to try recycling twine. So that was a good news story, and I think that'll probably increase again in the second quarter. So right now, the APRG's focus is the advancement of a permanent program, which includes harmonization with Manitoba and Saskatchewan. We want the flexibility to add new materials to the regulation over time. So if a permanent program comes in, we've been saying we don't want it just to be brought in for grain bags, and then like in 5 years, we have to like lobby the government to politically open up the legislation to bring other materials in. We should add all the materials at once with a flexible timeline for when each material is implemented. That's what Manitoba's done. We think that just makes it easier. It's not a political process. We want transparency and accountability for all stakeholders. That includes like, obviously the farmers, which we'd end up paying for it because things like that always roll downhill, right? Costs. But also municipalities shouldn't have any costs downloaded onto them. Like if they're going to be sorting and things like that, they should be compensated. And that's currently what the pilot program is doing. And then we also want an establishment of a plan with the government of Alberta to fund the transition. It usually takes 18 months to 2 years when you stop a pilot program and start a permanent program for like the permanent program to be self-funding. So you do need a bit of a bridge funding in there. So EPR, has anyone here heard of EPR? This is like, I didn't know anything about recycling until I got thrust into this, but EPR is the model of waste management that's taking over all around the world, and it stands for extended producer responsibility. But in this sense, producer isn't farmers, like we're used to be calling ourselves producers. But in this sense, this is from the waste industry side of things. So the producer is the manufacturer, first seller of packaging or plastics or anything like that. So EPR puts the onus for responsible collection of that material at end of life on whoever's manufacturing it or selling it. And they're the responsible party for the collection of that material. So it's a totally different way of thinking about how to deal with waste. And this is becoming very common all around the world. Most provinces in Canada are implementing it for consumer stuff. And in fact, Alberta has introduced legislation on this in 2022. So Saskatchewan has had EPR for grain bags since 2016, and Manitoba has had an EPR program for twine and grain bags since 2021. Quebec and PEI also have EPR. So talking about harmonization with neighboring provinces, being a little bit behind other provinces is actually a good thing in some sense, because you can kind of see where they've made mistakes and like what the costs are. And so in Saskatchewan and Manitoba, their permanent program costs 22.5 cents a kilogram to recycle grain bags. And that works out to $17 to $107 a grain bag, obviously depending on the size. And that's 5 to 7% of cost of a grain bag. And for twine in Saskatchewan, it's still only a pilot. In Manitoba, it's 33 cents a kilogram or 15 cents a pound, which is 7 to 10% of the cost. And as farmers and business people, we hate seeing increases to cost. And that's always the number one concern whenever I talk to farmers, is like, we don't want to pay for it. Like, increased costs are a big problem for us. But if you look at the twine, it's 21 cents a bale on a $140 bale or whatever people are paying. It's a very small fraction of the cost of a bale. And it just ensures that there would be responsible disposal of the product at end of life. Like when you buy it, so the recycling for it is already paid for. And really the recycling, the cost that you pay in an environmental handling fee is really for the transportation of that material back to a recycling place. So the next steps in Alberta. So EPR has actually been introduced in Alberta, as I said, in 2022. It's taken 3 years for Alberta Environment to like work through all of the regulations and how it's going to roll out. But they started with single-use plastics and packaging and like consumer products and hazardous household waste, which was really complicated. Like, we actually think it would have been easier for them to introduce ag plastics, specifically grain bags and like herbicide containers, as the first one, because it's a smaller user group and like the items are bigger and it's already very well developed. But they chose to do it this way. We're hoping that ag plastics be the next items brought in. So that, like it took effect April 1st of this year for these items. And so we've been asking for them to bring ag plastics in as the next ones. We don't know when that's going to happen. And so we've put in a request for the pilot to be extended until the end of 2027. And we've also asked for increased funding to expand the pilot to include silage wrap and silage film. Because I think those are the other two big items in Alberta, and especially for beef producers like us.
Quadrupled in the last 3 to 4 years. Bale wrappers are thing that everybody's
Yeah. Yeah, like it's hard to put up hay in country when we're getting rain, and so yeah, bale wrap is becoming a bigger issue for sure. And then just a month ago, Alberta Agriculture actually put out their stakeholder engagement. So anytime they do a change in policy, they really want to hear from the stakeholders. So they're asking for input from farmers, but also retailers and the plastics manufacturers and waste commissions and rural municipalities on any input. It actually closed last week, but they extended it. So this is the website to go to if you want to fill out the engagement, and it closes October 3rd. So if you have specific thoughts, a lot of the questions they ask on there, you might have no idea about. You can just skip them because it's like about program design or things very specific to the waste management industry. But if you have specific concerns or thoughts on how a program should be designed or how available it needs to be, like how far would you be willing to drive to drop stuff off, definitely go there and you can tell the government your thoughts on it. And just personally, I think the government is hesitant to implement any program that's going to cost farmers more. I think that in Alberta, the government is scared of farmers, and like Bill 6 was a good example. And I think it's a good thing in some ways, but we also need to do more communication and education to farmers, just so that they're not taken unawares by an increasing cost on things, and explain why it's important to actually pay that cost. And that leads me into one of the, so I gave this presentation to the ABP board of directors about a month ago, and they said, great presentation, but like, why do you want to recycle it? Like, why are you collecting it? What do they do with the stuff afterwards? And I thought that's a key point. And so I put this slide in. So when you drop your plastic off at a recycling place, the first thing that's done is it has to get aggregated and they have to get a full load. So they need to densify it because you can't, the most expensive cost for a program like this is shipping it. And so you can't be shipping air. So you really need to densify stuff. That's why they need grain bags rolled and densified. Same thing with silage plastic or anything else. They have to densify it, twine, they collect it, and then they like bale it to get it as much on a load as possible. Once they have a full load, a truck comes and collects it, takes it to a recycler. When it gets to the recycler, like for grain bags, we'll use an example. The grain bags get dropped either into a hopper that's on top of like an industrial cheese grater, and it goes back and forth and grates the plastic into little flakes, or it gets fed into like a big drum with carbide teeth on it, kind of like a silage harvester that shreds it. And either way, you end up getting these little tiny pieces of plastic. That's why the material going through those shredders is why they want it clean, and they don't like gravel, they don't like manifolds, they don't like mufflers, they don't like hammers, they don't like wrenches. All that stuff has been, like we've toured some of these plants, they're entrepreneurs, business owners, and when they get a piece of metal inside a grain bag going into that thing, like that costs them a lot of money. So that's why when you're doing this, you just have to be sure you're not including stuff like that. Once you get the shredded material, it goes through a couple water baths. So it kind of gets agitated in water and a lot of the organics and grit settles out. It'll usually go through 2 water baths, and then it gets extruded. So it gets heated up and melted, and it gets forced through a screen that takes out some of the bigger organics and stuff. And it turns into these things that they kind of look like goose poop pellets of plastic. We'll just pass that around. That's the initial stage, and then they melt that again, and then it gets forced through an even finer mesh screen that takes out more of the organics and contaminants. Those screens have to get taken out and thrown out. They're little like kind of metal screens. Once it goes through that second screen, it's extruded in long plastic filaments, kind of like spaghetti, and then a cold water knife cuts it into little tiny pellets. And this is what this is what is formed. They're just tiny little round, flat beads kind of plastic. And that's actually what's sold on the open commodity market to people that buy plastic to make stuff. And that's like a commodity. So they can't sell. It's just like when you guys are selling grain, you don't want to mix two types of grain together. You're not going to be putting your wheat in your barley bin and then trying to sell it because you're not going to get anything for it. Different plastics have different purposes and different properties. And so that's why they're really concerned about when you're bringing it in and collecting it, you have to be careful to segregate it because they have different chemical properties, and they want to try to produce as pure of post-consumer resin as possible to sell back into the marketplace. So what are they actually doing with the resin? Like, what can you do with plastic? Depends on the type of the plastic. So for twine, twine is made out of polypropylene, and it's actually very recyclable. I don't know if you guys remember Bryden Cordage. They used to have a product called Revolver Twine, and it was black, a black twine. It was actually 100% recycled twine, because you can take twine, melt it down, turn it back into twine. Unfortunately, that plant got sold to a different company that didn't think that they wanted to do that, and they just shut it down. But right now, most of the twine that gets recycled goes into car parts, flower pots, composite decking. We put that fiber on composite decking. It's like 98% recycled plastic with a little bit of wood fiber. We put that on our house. I'd never go back to wood. It's expensive, but the stuff lasts forever, which is good in some things, like if you don't have to replace it. And then also dimensional lumber. For grain bags and silage film, it can go into new agricultural film plastics. So it can, I think 20 to 30% of recycled grain bags can actually get put right back into new grain bags. And they've, like, that used to be maybe 5%. So they're always coming up with ways of making things more recyclable and bringing more recycled product back into the original. The ultimate goal of a EPR type program is to get full circle recycling. Like, that's the goal of the recycling industry in general, is to encourage the manufacturers of plastics to figure out different ways of making plastics and then also recycling plastics, that you can take a plastic item and then recycle it. Because right now, a lot of it's just downcycled. Like, you melt it down, it's like physical, mechanical recycling. You melt it down and then try to make it back into something else. But every time they make a new product, they might put like colors in it, or they might put like stretch chemicals in it or something like that. So it's not 100% pure. So then when you melt all that down physically and produce those pellets, that pellet is actually like a mixture of everything that was in, like, grain bags are actually made up of probably 6 or 7 layers of different types of plastic, even in that small layer. Some are for stretch, some are for strength, some are for oxygen barriers, etc. And so when you melt that all down together, it's not as perfect as like pure resin. But EPR ideally should be encouraging companies to come up with better products in the long run. My personal experience, so it all started for me with silage pit plastic, and my landfill is taking this again now. They're taking ag plastics, but you have to put it in big tote bags. And then they're actually they're segregating it, and they're putting it on top of their old sealed pit. So after they have a landfill cell that's full and they cover it and put all of their breathing pipes and stuff in, they're going back and putting ag plastics in a layer on top of that in these huge tote bags and then covering it up. But for me, I'm still rolling them up like I always have. But now, instead of building a big fence out of it, I bought a compactor. So this lumber is actually made out of recycled plastics. That's what this black lumber is. But I have this compactor that's on just drill stem. So I put the plastic sheeting in there, and then when it's full, I just compress it down with a hydraulic and leave it for a couple days, open it up. I can put more in until it's full, compress it down. You do that 3 or 4 times, and then you tie it off with twine, and then you can open it up and lift it out with your pallet fork. And that's probably, I don't know, 400 pounds or something. It's pretty heavy, densification rate for transport. And then when I get a full load, I just put them on my flat deck and take it to Bashaw. So we're really lucky in Alberta. We have 2 of North America's 3 grain bag recycling facilities. There's one in Assar in southern Alberta, and then one got built in Bashaw, partly because of the pilot. The pilot in Alberta Entrepreneurs don't want to build something like a recycling facility if they're not certain of supply. They need supply coming in to run. And so as soon as the grain bag or the grain bag and twine program started in Alberta, this plant started getting built. Bashaw is pretty close for me, and they love taking this as a backfill to all the grain bags. They also take like industrial pond liner and things just to keep their line going. And so I can take my silage pit plastic and drop off there for free because it's close, but not everybody is going to want to drive all the way there, right? And that's the point of a permanent program is if everybody pays a little bit of money on their silage pit plastic or whatever plastic when you buy it, people that are close to the recycler are kind of subsidizing people that might live in High Prairie or Peace River or Manning or anywhere that's a long ways away. So that's kind of the model of it. For me, I do a lot of bale grazing certain years. Some winters I'll do maybe 300 or 400 bales. A lot of the bales I buy still have twine on it for whatever reason. And so when this pilot program started, I thought, well, I'm like on the APRG, I better be recycling my twine or trying it. So I set up a barrel, a 45-gallon barrel in my Quonset with one of their big recycling bags. And then I have a tote bag beside it for dirty twine. And I just thought, I'm not going to spend any extra time trying to clean my twine because, you know, certain bales, if they've gone through a freeze-thaw cycle, you try to get the twine off and there's like big chunks of frozen material and debris and dirt on there. If I get that off a bale, I spend zero time trying to clean it. It goes straight into my garbage super sack. And then any twine that comes off clean, I put in my recycling barrel. And this was after 1 year of doing bale grazing. I think there's 8 bags there of clean twine. And then my super sack was maybe like a 16th full. And I actually still have that same bag in my Quonset after 5 years, and it's not even half full of dirty twine. And I don't spend any extra time doing it. So my message to farmers is don't try to be perfect. Just do what's easy, and it's going to be a big difference, specifically for twine. I don't actually use any twine when I'm baling myself because I'm always racing weather, it seems, and I only use net wrap. I love net wrap when I'm baling. I hate net wrap when I'm feeding it in the wintertime. It's just like little pieces come off everywhere. I don't like how cattle chew on it. It always seems I can't get all of it, especially if it goes through a freeze thaw. And unfortunately, none of the big companies ever thought that it was worthwhile coming up with an alternative to that. Luckily, there's a farmer and his son in Alberta in partnership with Alberta Innovates and some researchers at the U of A. They came up with this stuff. It's Nature's Net Wrap. It's a biodegradable, well, it's not biodegradable, it's compostable. So it's it's certified compostable. I'll pass this around. It's totally different from soft net wrap, like the petroleum-based net wrap. It's almost like, when you feel it, it's almost like monofilament fishing line.
So technically, you don't have to even, it can stay on a bale and it dissolve on its own.
Well, it breaks down. So their certification is it breaks down. 98% of it will turn back to soil in 18 months in an industrial composting facility. So that's like where you're properly composting it and aerating it. It does, like I've had some for 3 years now on bales, and if you stack your bales like mushrooms, it's still almost perfect. Yeah, toadstool. But some of my bales I had unloaded with a self-unloading bale truck, and so they're in those triangles, and then snow gets there, and then some of the stuff sprouts, you know, along the edges, some of the grain. And then when I go to take that top bale off, it's rotted through right along the edge. So there's a purpose for it, I think. The 2 big areas I see it being useful is when you're bale grazing. Like I like leaving my net wrap on when I'm bale grazing, and I like leaving my bales like this, not like on their side, not on their end. But then in the spring, when you go to cut this off, you can't get that piece underneath. And so if it's traditional plastic, like then I'd always be going around trying to pick that up after the cows went through and it's all full of poop and stubble or whatever. Whereas this, I wouldn't feel bad just cutting the 2 sides, taking the top off, and then that little bit in 5 years, hopefully, is just going to turn back to dirt. It's made out of starch. So it's a proprietary technology, obviously. They won't tell us, but it's a bunch of biopolymers, which is starch-based.
The price wise, it's the same as normal. Actually, it's a little cheaper than normal net wrap.
No, I just care about mosquitoes.
Yeah. So the Lakeland, yeah. So so that bale grazing, I think, is an obvious one that works really well. And then the other one is anybody, I know like quite a few people that just shred their bale. So they put their bale with net wrap on it into their bale processor and then blow it onto their bedding pack without taking it off. And so you're just blowing plastic all over your bedding pack, and then you're taking that out and putting it on your field. And those microplastics break down into nanoplastics, and then they actually can get taken up into your plants. And plastic is a huge problem because it's, yeah, like they've found, yeah, yeah, yeah. Microplastics are absolutely everywhere. And so I think like if plastics are so valuable, but especially for things like net wrap, this is probably a good option. And if you're feeding your, like if you're shredding your hay and then feeding it to your cattle, this might also be better. They're doing some tests on cannulated cows, right? That's what it's called, where they're putting it inside the rumen at Lakeland College, and then also tests on inside bedding packs. So they're shredding it and putting it in bedding packs and seeing how long it's going to take to rot down in a bedding pack, because that's an anaerobic, it's not the ideal composting facility, but I think over time, like I took all the stuff I had because I was actually keeping it because I'm like, what do you do with it? Right? And Larry and Austin said, well, it'll break down. So I just went and opened up one of my bedding packs and dumped a whole bunch and spread it out and piled it. And I'm not going to get the manure spreaders to haul that one for a few years because I don't want them to be angry with me. But I'll pull it apart in like a year and see how it's breaking down. And yeah, I think it's a good, and ideally, products like this is what EPR, like the hope of EPR is that it'll encourage companies to do more products like this or make their products more recyclable. Because if you go to your New Holland store to buy net wrap and you have normal plastic net wrap and you have to pay an environmental handling fee on it to pay for the recycling of it, or you have this one beside it, which doesn't need to be recycled, all of a sudden this becomes more cost competitive, right? And so that's the advantage of having an EPR program, hopefully. So yeah, that's kind of the end of my talk. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Anybody online, if you have any questions as well.
So you've been using this, or using it now, or?
Yep, yeah, I've been using this. They brought one of their prototype rolls down, and we rolled some. I have a 569 John Deere baler, and it goes through that no problem. I think some of their other balers, the original stuff, they had to build like a little kind of tin or steel
So the
feeder.
John Deere just threw it in one bale.
Yeah, I did on mine. Yeah, we tried putting that thing in at first, and it wasn't really working. So we took it out and just left it how it was normally, and then it works fine. So yeah, this is what I'm using now. If you're gonna stockpile your bales for like 5 years, it might not be the best thing. But I use most of my bales up. Yeah,
I got twine in my bale.
I'd say you could like. I'm not a marketer for it or anything, right? But yeah, I'd take I'd be to buy a roll and try it and see how it works for you in your specific scenario. Yeah. Yeah.
Special that recycles, what kind of products are they making from what's coming out of?
Well, so yeah. So the recycling facility in Bashaw, you asked what sort of materials they're making, and in the recycling industry, it's a good question. Like we collect the material, and then it's actually bought by the recycling facilities. So unfortunately in Canada, there's two. In North America, there's only 3 places to bid on like grain bags or silage film, right? And so it's a very small marketplace, but they'll actually bid on the truckloads of grain bags that are rolled up. When they get them, they make the PCR pellets, those post-consumer recycled pellets, and then they sell those to people that make things. And so they're really selling, the recyclers are kind of caught in a difficult spot. They're competing with virgin resin, and they're selling a post-consumer resin onto the global marketplace. And they were getting, like a year and a half ago, they were actually getting pretty good money for it. It was cheaper than virgin resin, but then with all the tariffs and everything, with Trump and China has stopped buying virgin resin from North America. I think for political reasons. And so all of a sudden we have a huge oversupply of virgin resin in North America, which has dropped the price, and then they're competing with virgin. Recycling industry, like I didn't know anything about it 10 years ago, but it's just as complicated as like the ag industry, right? With like all the moving parts for commodities. So yeah, they sell it, and then people can make all different products with it. Yeah, no. There's a guy, Jonathan Beekman, he runs Revolution Plastics, I think it's called, in southern Alberta near Lethbridge, and he makes recycled plastic lumber. And I've bought a lot of that actually anywhere on the farm that you have lumber in contact with the soil. It works great as a replacement. It doesn't have the tensile strength, like the structural strength of wood, but it'll never rot. So all of my wind boards I'm slowly replacing in my feedlot with plastic, because bulls, when they rub on it, they'll never break it, and then it also never rots. So I think there's advantages to plastic, like anywhere that you're worried about wood rotting. They make great any like lining around your flower beds, or I've made some planter boxes and stuff with it. It works good.
I got advice from Alberta water people to put bowls in my dugout to stop evaporation. So evaporation plastic bowls.
Yeah.
The only place I can get is by the container load out of China.
Yeah.
Well, if you're going to put in 10 million balls into your dugout to be floating around there, I mean, that's a great product to use recycled plastics for, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think once there's, so plastic balls. Yeah.
Yeah. It stops about like 95%.
They do that in the States.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of like good news stories that could be like Alberta actually has, the Alberta government has had in their natural gas super strategy, they want to make Alberta the hub for full circle recycling in North America. And that's been their policy for a few years. And I think part of it is this would fit into it nicely, but it's because we're kind of a petroleum superpower, right? And like with all the upgraders, we're producing a lot of virgin plastics in Alberta. But I think the government sees part of that is trying to encourage that full circle model of, if we're producing a lot of plastics, we should figure out a way of like reusing them, because it still has value. And right now, a lot of people so a lot of farmers say, well, I don't want to pay anything extra for recycling of a product. Like it's free to dispose of it right now, which I always say, no, we don't get anything for free. Landfills are really quite expensive, and we're paying for the disposal of our bulky ag plastics in the landfill, but it's a hidden cost for us because it's just lumped in with all of our municipal tax. And then the other side is, if you want to be burning it on farm, that's actually not legal. And if you think that that's the appropriate solution, I'd say try to encourage one of your commodity organizations that you're part of to lobby the government to exempt farmers from being able to burn ag plastic, like exempt it from the regulation. And I don't think that any commodity group is actually publicly going to do that, because we've been marketing ourselves for so long as stewards of the land, and like taking the long look and leaving things better for the next generation, that burning plastics, like that low temperature combustion of plastic, the smoke doesn't go very far. It lands on our soil, and then it's going to be right into the food that we're producing and selling people, right? And that's where we live, and that's where our kids are growing up. So I think burning is a terrible solution. Unfortunately, in some places, the governments haven't really left a lot of options for farmers, but hopefully like that's what this whole thing is about, right? Like that's why I got involved. So
Yeah, we have one question online. How does the Nature's Net wrap last on silage bales?
I don't know. I've never put it on silage bales, so that's a good question. I'd get in touch with Nature's Net Wrap. You can go to their website, and like Larry and Austin, they're both farmers in Alberta. They have cows and they do grain farming, so that would be a good question to ask them. They're probably, if they're not doing tests on it, they'd probably be interested in doing tests on it. Yeah, because it would be in contact with like moist forage, but then it's sealed, so I don't know what the longevity of it would be.
Great, thank you.
Your compressor? Where did you get the idea?
Oh, so Clean Farms actually, there was a separate pilot program that ran, it was funded from the federal government for silage, plastic and bale wrap in Alberta. They did it with a couple feedlots in southern Alberta and some dairy, like with Alberta Milk. They did it on some dairy farms and then a couple feedlots for 3 years, I think. And they needed a way of densifying and managing the plastic on farm. So Clean Farms, in partnership with that Jonathan Beekman, who makes the dimensional plastic lumber in southern Alberta, they came up with that idea. And the first one was like a really cumbersome block and tackle, so you didn't need to plug it into hydraulics. But I was like, why don't you just make one with a hydraulic ram on the back? And they made a model like that. And that's the one I just bought it directly from them. It was kind of expensive, but they actually have the PDF file for all the parts you'd need to build that yourself. Like it's quite easy. It has a ram, one single ram on the back, and then it's a drill stem frame. So it has a drill stem floor and then one pipe on the back that has a sleeve over it. And then it has a drill stem compressor frame that goes up and down. And then they've just built that one's out of recycled plastic lumber, but you could make it out of normal lumber that opens up on the front. And then that's all it is. It's like very simple, and it works awesome for managing your plastic on farm. Yeah. The biggest issue I think that's going to be for, well, any of this is culture change. Like it takes a long time. When swath grazing first came in, there was always the early adopters that try it, and then all of the neighbors look and they're like, that's kind of a weird thing. It's too much work, blah, blah, blah. It takes a long time in agriculture for change to happen. And like for collecting twine, you think, oh, it's just a little bit, it's only a handful, so every day you just throw it in the garbage. But if it's clean, why not just throw it in a collection bag rather than the garbage bin right beside it? The biggest thing for me with twine was my dad always like tied an overhand knot and tied it together. They don't like that in the recycling world because that knot actually makes it harder. It traps contaminants and grit and makes it harder to chop up. So they like it loose. So the big learning for me was I just had to coil it and then just kind of loop it around to hold it together till I got back to the Quonset. It's little things like that. For silage plastic, if you're used to just grabbing your silage plastic with the bucket of your tractor and ripping like a big ragged piece off and dumping in a pile with a bunch of old silage and manure and mud, it's going to be a huge change for you. If you're already kind of a little bit anal and keeping things neat around your yard and you're cutting strips off and then rolling it up, it's going to be hardly any work for you, right? So it's a culture change on how you do things on your farm is probably going to be the biggest thing for you.
Bashaw tape bale wraps?
So bale wrap is different from it. They'll take silage plastic. It's almost identical to grain bags. Silage plastic or bale wrap has a stretch compound in it. And so it actually has additional properties that grain bags and silage plastic don't, and you need a separate recycling facility to do that because that stretch material gums up their extruders and their screens, and so every product has to be separated, and that's going to be another cultural thing for people to manage their plastic. Like if you have like 6 different plastics that you're using on your farm, you're going to have to.
But there's no place to recycle them yet.
There is, like Quebec's been collecting them because they included everything. So there are places to send bale wrap, not in Alberta. And for twine, there's an announcement just came out about a month ago that the Alberta government put a bunch of funding towards a capital project in Lacombe County at Bentley, which isn't very far from me, for a twine and super sack recycling facility. So Alberta's actually, it's a good news story for Alberta for rural economies. Like that plant in Bashaw, it runs 6 days a week, 24 hours a day, and it employs a lot of people in otherwise kind of a town that didn't have a lot going for it. And probably that'll be similar. And it also cuts down on transportation costs. So like those costs that you saw for the environmental handling fee in Saskatchewan and Manitoba, it might not be the same in Alberta.
It costs 10 cents more for a bag of bale wrap. I pay that as long as I get recycled.
Yeah.
Because I got a huge pile of bale wrap now. I can't take it to the landfill because they don't want it. Then if I have to start stuffing it in garbage bags, I'm just technically what I'm doing is going into regular garbage, just going to regular landfill. So
that's what we've heard from no farm. Okay, this will be my last comment. We've heard from most farmers, we don't want to pay for anything, but that's, farmers say that about everything, me included. But they said we wouldn't mind paying for a recycling program if we knew it was run properly and efficiently, and we actually knew it was going to get recycled and not just like secretly disposed of somewhere. So, yeah. Yeah.
Very good question. Where can people find information where to take plastics for recycle?
Yeah, for sure. I actually have, so if you go to the Clean Farms website, it's here, this cleanfarms.ca, and then programs at a glance. So they have, their website's actually really good. So if you go to Clean Farms website, they have all the provinces. If you click on Alberta, yeah, it'll bring up this. So if you click on Alberta, oh, where did it go? Online, when I click this, and does it come up for you guys, like the website? It's not coming up on here. Anyway, so yeah, if you go to Clean Farms website, click on Alberta, and then you can say, find a location, and then it actually brings up an interactive map. So it brings up like a Google type map. You can zoom in on it, and it has all of the collection locations in the province of Alberta, and you can actually, you put in, what are you trying to recycle? And so you can select like bale wrap or grain bags. In Alberta, you can't recycle bale wrap, but if you click on twine, then the map will show you all the places in Alberta that recycle twine, or if you click grain bag, it'll show you all the places that recycle a grain bag. So it's actually a really good website. And I looked before I came up here, and Woodlands County actually does have, they're part of the pilot. And so they have, I forget the names of them, one straight north of here across the river somewhere, and then one south of us. Those were the two. Are there three?
But right now they're not.
Jugs if you don't buy the chemicals.
Well, that's, they have to take your jugs.
Yeah, try to tell them that.
Yeah. So the reason why they changed actually, so the herbicide container program actually started in Alberta like 34 years ago, and it's being run as an EPR program voluntarily. So they saw that government was going to get involved if they didn't start collecting all that herbicide containers themselves. And so it's being run as an EPR program, but the transparency isn't quite there because it's not regulated. And that's why if this program becomes permanent, herbicide jugs will get included in the regulation. And then I think they'll have to do things a little bit differently. But the reason why they took it away from municipalities is a lot of the because it's herbicide and it's like a dangerous substance, in order to collect them, you needed a concrete engineered barrier where it was safe to store them. And a lot of the municipalities are like, we're not doing that. You guys aren't paying us to build it. Why would we do that? Like, it's your responsibility. And so they just said, the municipalities pretty much told Clean Farms, like, we're not doing that.
Chem companies are having the jugs down.
Wow.
They're throwing in bags.
Yeah.
Throwing in a building with no containment of any kind.
Well, I think you'd have to talk to Clean Farms. The regulation is it has to be like a concrete apron or whatever, so.
McEwen's in Evansburg and Stony Plain, you take your bags, you go to the back 40 around the shed, throw them in a pile. That's what they go.
You need to talk to Clean Farms about it. Like right now, Clean Farms is actually like, they're called a PRO, a producer responsibility organization. They're actually run by, their board is a member of all of the huge ag chem companies. Like anybody that's selling herbicide or pharmaceuticals, those are the people that are running Clean Farms. So it's industry funded and industry run. And they're, for the herbicide program, that's not regulated in Alberta. It's regulated in other provinces now, but yeah, talk to them. The Clean Farms actually, like in my experience, they're a very well-run program. So, yeah.
So is there any push for I guess it would be more secondary to us, but the packaging that we have for our products that goes to consumers, is there any push for Clean Farms to be involved in that?
What sort of packaging you're talking about?
Any meat you have has
Oh.
plastic on it, containers, wrapping, bread bags.
So,
I just recently read a really interesting story, and they're doing it with the University of California, I believe. And they're extruding the cellulose
out of plants, and they found one of the best ones is out of the prunings of grapevines.
Mhm.
And it stays clear, and when you compost, it's gone in 2 weeks.
Yeah. So the
Yeah.
question was if there was, if Clean Farms or anything would be involved in selling products from the farm to consumers, and that's not what they're involved
Yeah.
in at all. Like that would actually fall more under what the EPR
Yeah.
was earlier that I talked about in Alberta, where they did it for single-use plastics and packaging, paper packaging products and household hazardous waste. Like
Yeah.
all of those things would actually, and there's a huge like that is already under huge discussion all over the world, because these EPR rules that are coming in are trying to force companies to actually either use less packaging, like so you don't have like 5 pieces of plastic to take off something if it's unneeded, and then also to come up with alternatives like biodegradable or compostable. Yeah, and like that Nature's Net Wrap, I think they're actually looking at using it in a different weave pattern for, you know, like onion bags and stuff, you know, like, because right now when you buy onions, like all sorts of things like that, and it just takes somebody putting the effort into designing it and seeing that there's a need for it. So yeah, there's lots of good news stories made in Alberta around ag plastic.
We'll make this mandatory program.
Well, go and put that comment. They're looking for input from farmers, saying like, I don't mind paying for it if I know it's being recycled, or I want this material included. And they have recommended timelines. So like NetWrap, they have the timeline for bringing NetWrap into a permanent program is quite far out, which I agree with, because NetWrap is a big problem. Like it's really, anybody who has NetWrap around machinery knows, like gets into bearings, it's really hard to handle. It has a lot of organic contamination in it. So that's the furthest one out, but they do have on that engagement survey, you can see they have kind of a staggered timeline. For the easier ones are right up at the front, and then silage, plastic and bale wrap are midterm, and then it goes out. And we've had comments from people like the greenhouse industry. They're really interested in the film. And then like beekeepers, they use some plastic that is they don't know what to do with. And then lick tubs, like some ranchers in southern Alberta are like, what about all these huge lick tubs? So
There's
yeah.
in farming, like vegetable farming, there is new paper plasticky bags of Germany that are cellulose fiber that they sell salads and stuff in that to grocery stores.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We like our society, plastic is an amazing product because it's food safe, it's really light. So it makes transportation cheap. The big problem is it doesn't break down. And I think we were slowly realizing that globally, that it's plastic pollution is a problem. And so we need to come up with solutions for it. And like agriculture, I think we have big bulky items. But you know, globally, ag plastics is just like a small part of the picture, but it's still a problem. Yeah. Are there any other questions online, Deanie?
No, we don't have any other questions
Yeah,
online.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Assar. That was a very interesting presentation. Well, yeah, got the mic here for you, Jason.
Perfect.
It's already on.
There we go.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now? Yeah, perfect.
It was.
Okay. So yeah, avian influenza is one of the major things that we've been dealing with. I just got an email yesterday that it's back in Alberta, I guess, or potentially going to be back in Alberta. A few years ago, it was really bad. So we would have to go out and deal with the mass, either composting or burial of that material, working with CFIA. The other thing that we deal with is for mass disposal is commercial barns. And then other things of like disposal of loss for cattle due to starvation, heat, drowning, poor animal husbandry, and unlawful disposal. And then we'll see here. Another big one that we deal with for investigation wise is just dumped carcasses. Sometimes we get complaints about carcasses in the ditch, sometimes in creeks, things like that. So it's another one that we usually have to deal with. Here's just an example of one of the mass disposal, like for the big barn fires that we have. This one was down south. It was a couple years ago now. Yeah, it was 800,000 pounds worth of pork. Disposal is complex, and rendering companies, they don't take the material because of all the burnt down stuff that's in there, so they won't take it. So then we have to look at other methods to try to deal with that. And yeah, there's the fire there. I believe it was just a big electrical fire. I believe it was, yes. So yeah, these type of files we have to be notified with right away and deal with it. I think the regulations, it's 7 days. So when something like this happens, they've got like 7 days to try to deal with material. That date can be extended, right? As long as there's some sort of plan in place on what's to be done. So when it comes to dead animal disposal, peace officers will sometimes come out and deal with them. They'll use it under the Environmental Protection Enhancement Act, and sometimes as a litter, and sometimes there's municipal bylaws that they sometimes use. But a lot of times they're phoning us to work with us to try to deal with those situations. So this is where it gets a little bit dry, but so the Dead Animal Disposal Act regulations, the big thing here is that under the definition, dead animal means all or part of an animal that has died from a cause other than having been slaughtered or killed. Wildlife are exempt. Interesting thing, it's never, most of the time, like we deal with just agricultural animals, but there was an issue with a pet crematorium place. And we had to deal with that because it says animal, right? There is no definition, and cat, dog is an animal, right? So we had to deal with that situation where they weren't following disposal methods properly. So that was a new one for me. But yeah, so the big one here, owner's duties, identifies that the owner must dispose of a dead animal in accordance with the regulations, state that the owner must ensure that odors, runoff, spread of disease is minimized, and that dead animal does not create a nuisance. This next one here is the one about the 7 days. So the owner of a dead animal shall dispose of the dead animal within 7 days unless the owner stores the dead animal outside during winter months in a freezer unit or in accordance with the directions of the chief provincial vet. So there is a bit of leeway when it is the winter time there. On a side note, disposal by a meat facility, this means like a butcher shop, an abattoir can only do dead animal disposal by landfill, incinerator, compost facility, or rendering. And then section 5 clearly states that in order to do burial, open fire burning, farm composting, or natural disposal, you must be the owner of both the animal and the land. That's the key thing. So a lot of times, though, some producers will have cattle on someone else's land or whatever. So then it just becomes a matter of if it dies on there and we're doing natural disposal, sometimes it just means a written permission or whatever from the landowner. The other one, yeah, defines, section 6 defines the parameters around disease animals, and the disposal must be dealt with the office of the chief provincial vet. So again, that ties back to the avian influenza, or if there's a disease on the farm, that's when the chief vet gets involved. And we work closely with them when it comes to that. So in Alberta, there are 7 disposal options for dead animals. There's burial, burning, composting, food for other animals, rendering, natural disposal, and then other approved methods. I'm not going to go in deep with all these because some of these are broken down later on. But so yeah, for burial, the biggest thing for burial that I'll point out here is that section 4 there. It says 1 or more dead animals may be buried in a farm burial pit. The total weight of the dead animals buried in the pit does not exceed 2,500 kg. That's the biggest one. And that one's where it gets a bit complicated, right? So anything above that needs to get approval from the chief provincial vet. So if it's a confined feeding operation, typically, if they're doing a line of row of composting, they're going to be over that 2,500 kg. So typically, they just get permission from the chief vet. We find a place that's suitable where the soil's fine, there's no runoff issues, and things like that, and we work with them. This one here, there's another chart there that breaks those down. This is for a small farm. So these are dead animals buried in a pit, does not exceed 100 kg. So the setbacks are a bit, they're not as far as the other ones. So 50 meters from any well, water intake, stream, creek, pond, and so on. At least 25 meters from the edge of a coulee, 100 meters from a residence. And then at least 3 meters from any farm burial pit, and then is covered with a minimum of 1 meter of compacted soil. And then again, it's flagged on the bottom. That exceeds 2,500 kg, needs chief vet approval. So these are the setbacks for the main one here. Again, it's kind of like the other one, but it's 100 meters from a well, water, and dugouts, all those things there. And again, 100 meters from a residence. A lot of the times, if we get a complaint, that's what it is. It's they've buried it, or they've just left it there, and it doesn't meet that setback from the residence, right? That's when we typically will get complaints. And then there's that other one there, boundary of any land or leased by another person unless written consent to the site being closer to the boundary. So yes, so even if you're going to bury on your land, it has to be 100 meters from your neighbor's land, and then if not, you need to have written consent. The other one there is, I should point out too, is provincial highway and road, 300 meters, right? Burning. This one here is, it's a bit gray. I'll just read what it says here. It's very, yeah. So subject to section 6 and the terms of any order made under section 18, a dead animal may be burned in accordance with the applicable provisions in the Environmental Protection Enhancement Act, in the regulations or codes of a practice under the act in relating to the burning. So the Disposal of Dead Animal Act says, yeah, you can burn, but then you have to follow APIA, the Environmental Protection Act. So, and for them, it's like in an open fire or an incinerator. And here on the next slide here, so again, yeah, so Alberta Environment looks after the burning side of this. And for them, under their codes of practice, it says, very few products are allowed to be burned in Alberta due to unlawful release into the atmosphere and the extremely high temperatures required to burn. The average burn pile will not meet these strict requirements. The code identifies temperatures must reach 500 degrees Celsius in the primary burn and 870 degrees Celsius in the secondary burn. So it's a bit, so you can burn, but it's a bit difficult. It's not really recommended. So composting facility. So these again are your landfill sites there. They have different classes. So a class 1 is typically what you're looking for. They will take disposal of dead animals. So yeah, dead animal may be disposed of by composting in class 1. Yeah. So, but the catch with those too is sometimes you have to call those facilities because they might take it, they might not. And then if you have beef, you're looking at SRM material as well. Sometimes those facilities will take it or won't, which leads into, oh, I guess not yet. So farm composting, this is the most common one. Again, a lot of setbacks. I'm not going to go through every single one here, but it's kind of similar to the other one, 100 meters from water well, water, 100 meters from a residence again. If there's anything different in here, I think we're at 300 meters from it, but I think it was the same. 60 meters. Yeah, okay, that's for indoor farm composting. There's a line for that there. Then food for other animals. So you can do this, use disposal for other animals. The key things here is that the animal did not have any infectious or contagious disease. That's the big one, and was not euthanized with drugs. Those are the two big things. And then the bottom line there in bold, no person shall feed a dead animal to a production animal as defined in the authorized medicine sales regulation. The feeding of dead animals to the production animal would contravene the Health of Animals Act, Canada, or the regulations under the Act. Rendering. So this is a more common one that is done. That can be used. The rendering plant, there's two, I believe, yeah. So there's two rendering companies in Alberta, West Coast Reduction and then Lethbridge Biogas. Depending on where you are, West Coast Reduction, I don't know how far north they go. I've heard sometimes they will have contracts with some of the bigger farms, but the smaller farms, it's hit and miss. That's where you typically would use your landfill. And these are licensed by CFIA. Natural disposal, another common method. Again, key things for this, it becomes scavengers. So it says here in this section, natural disposal in respect of a dead animal means disposing of the dead animal in a manner that allows for scavenging. And where's the other line here? Again, the line is there again about this, the animal can't have infectious or contagious disease, and the dead animal was not euthanized by any drugs or other chemicals, and the total weight of the animals being disposed of on site does not exceed 1,000 kilograms. And there's another thing here. So each site has to be 500 meters between disposal sites. And again, another line about the property must be owned by you. And then 500 meters. This one here is 500 meters from any well, water intake, creek, pond, water source. And another point here, at least 400 meters from any livestock facility, including a pasture situated on land owned or leased by a person other than the owner of the dead animal. 400 meters for a residence for natural disposal. And 400 meters from any road. So this kind of just touches in on what I spoke about before when it came to mass disposal. The chief provincial vet office, they are the ones that deal with disaster or emergency in the province. So whenever there is one of those big cases, they're always involved, and this is what basically gives them the power. And it says that whatever they kind of say, whatever recommendations they have, this allows them to do that. And our chief provincial vet is Dr. Keith Lehman. And for publications, if anybody is interested, because I babbled a lot from the regulations and I don't remember them line for line, there is a publication on the internet. It's a livestock mortality management disposal plan. It kind of breaks down all those different disposal methods. So if you're ever looking for information on that, that's one resource that you can use. And then, unfortunately, part of the investigation side, sometimes on files, we might deal with producers who don't want to do anything about it. They'll just leave it there. So this here just shows the penalties, and it says the first offense to a fine of not more than $15,000 after the first day, and then up to $30,000, and furthermore, $2,000 for each day or part of a day. So those are some of the fines. And luckily, since I've been with IS, I haven't had to find anybody on this. Usually everyone is cooperative and they work with us. I don't have it here, but the other line I was going to say is that if you look at the publications and you don't understand some of the regulations, I recommend calling 310 Farm, saying you want to talk to somebody about disposal of dead animals. They will put you in touch with one of us, and we can sit there and go through the scenario, whatever it is, whatever you're dealing with, and try to figure out which disposal method works best for that situation. That's all I really had, so I don't know if anybody has any questions. Yes.
So for controlled scavenging or natural disposal, it said 500 meters between disposal sites, but like a lot of times on the farm, if you have one dead animal every year or something.
Yeah.
So can you reuse the same spot? Is there a time between?
I think it's once the material's kind of gone, right? Like, so that there isn't, so if it's just, there's nothing there to be scavenged, I think it kind of resets, right? Like, that's how I would look at it, because that's just it. You don't want to have scavengers and then, you know what I mean? Like, as long as that material's, there's not bringing in scavengers to that one, the new one would start the clock on the new one, right? Yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
Whoever's looking at, they have a disposal spot in our area.
Oh, really?
It's in-
Oh, really? Yeah. I would imagine that Fish and Wildlife would have something to deal with that, but yeah,
No, they don't.
they don't, eh? No.
Cougars, we've got bears, we've got everything.
Wow. Well, that's unfortunate.
Dump their dead horse in the ditch next to the road.
Yeah, that's right. Like I said, like I kind of touched on, we do get a lot of complaints about that. It'll be goats, whatever, found in the ditch. Usually the tags are removed. There's not much we can do if there's no tags or nobody saw anything, right? We find a lot of stuff gets dumped more up north. Maybe in this area too. There is a lot of crown land here too, but I haven't had any complaints in this area. But like dead cattle being dumped off in crown land, right? And you can't do that either, right? So
We have chickens and we're looking at doing, on-farm slaughter.
Yep.
And the only thing we have is feathers and heads and innards. We have a compost pile ourselves, but we don't have a commercial. compost. With, other problem is we're only 5 acres. I can't get 500 meters.
yes.
Away from. So I have to take all of that to a landfill?
No, I shouldn't, I have to look into that, but I know if you have an on-farm slaughter license, there is different methods that can be applied, is my understanding. I'd have to look into that, or I would discuss that when you're getting your, yeah, because they will talk about that, like you have to follow the regs and have a plan for that. So, but I do know there is an exemption for on-farm slaughter, and exactly what it is, I can't tell you right now. I'd have to look into it.
I think it's in that compost pile.
Yeah.
Thing, because
Yeah.
we do use our compost pile for our personal use of,
Yes,
and our dogs usually take care of most of it anyways. I'm sure there's a few predators,
yeah,
but we are definitely not far enough away that we're not bringing in coyotes to our neighbor's property,
right.
because they do have cattle.
Yeah.
So
It depend on your site. I mean, I don't know, like your compost method, if it is bringing lots of predators, there's other things that could be done, like electrical fence around the composting, things like that, like to show that you're trying to, but yeah, exactly, right? But again, I can't speak for it, not unless I'm there on site and seeing it, like what you're proposing. So, and again, I would look at the on-farm slaughter, the exemptions for that as well. I can't remember off the top of my head what they are.
and we're doing minor kilograms compared to, you're talking about beef or bison or.
Right, yeah.
Is there a certain method you recommend the most for on-farm disposal?
It depends on the situation, it really does, right? The time of the year, location. Yeah, I can't really comment which one is better because they all are a good method. Like I said, it just depends on the year. burials, and it depends on the site as well. Some places you can bury it, some are in low spots, so you can't, so it's better to compost. So yeah, it's site specific.
Okay,
Yep.
that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah, I think we don't have any questions online. Oh, yeah, can the presentations be shared? Yeah, we will share the recording afterwards. So yeah, if there are no other questions.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Well, thank you everyone for coming. My name is Louise Liebenberg. I'm a beef and sheep farmer up in the High Prairie area. I'm not a government worker. I'm not a specialist on carcass disposal. My field of interest and where I work the most is in livestock conflict resolution. So I was in Spain in November talking at what we do here in Alberta with wildlife conflicts, because they always say, you know, we have lots of wolves, how do we deal with things? So that is my speciality area, livestock guardian dogs and that. So the actual disposing of the carcasses, I'm happy that the gentleman before me was here to explain about the regulations and that, because I'm more going to talk about the conflict that can arise with improper carcass disposal and how that can ultimately affect your ranch. My screens, there are going to be quite a lot of like dead animal pictures in there, so I hope everyone's not too sensitive about it. If the FBI or somebody ever had to investigate my computer, they would find me pictures of dead cows, find me pictures of dead sheep, so it's going to be kind of curious there. So I'm not going to talk about what you just spoke about, all the timelines and the things like that, because we had a wonderful presentation on that. If you do need more information, then those are some government websites on how to dispose correctly of that. In my talk, because I'm a rancher, maybe there's some things that I didn't do exactly right. I think there are a lot of people that do have a boneyard in the back 40, and so I'm going to just be realistic on how we do talk about things. If I get investigated afterwards, well, you know, that's the risk I'm taking. So I'm just going to start off with one of the stories about what happened on our ranch. So we had a casualty event back in 2017. A couple of cows sunk through a dugout, drowned. It was in the dead of winter, so we had an excavator, had to take them out, and we decided to do just scavenging on farm kind of disposal because we couldn't dig big enough holes in the winter. So we put it away at the back of the farm. We locked the gates to make sure that our dogs wouldn't go and scavenge on the dead carcasses. We knew it would possibly bring in some coyotes and some other predators. We didn't want them to have conflict with our livestock guardian dogs, so we just shut that area off and didn't go there, which of course created a perfect storm because a wolf pack moved in. We have a wolf bounty in our area. We don't hunt on our property, so these wolves found a safe haven. They had a fresh source of carcasses to eat, raised 7 wolf puppies right in the middle of our ranch. And it kind of happened to us, and it was only looking back that we could actually see that we kind of created that problem. The fact that the cows died in the dugout was not, well, it had snow drifted on the fence around the dugout. Cows walked over, got on the dugout. That's what happened. So the hindsight was maybe, you know, maybe burial would have been a better option at that time, but we had to deal with it. So I'll just show you a little clip of how can I get this little video to play? On my computer, it's got a little play screen there. But so what happened is we artificially kept a wolf pack going on our ranch. Sorry for the shaky videos, but you can see these are some of the pups that were raised there. This was a female, and she raised 7 pups on the ranch, and they would just be trotting around. This is one of our hay fields, which for a sheep and cattle person just before calving time, around calving time, is very concerning, right? Because, you know, it's all great as long as she can catch her wild deer and her elk and whatever, but, you know, a fresh calf or a lamb out in the field
is a lot easier. So that is part of like what I call maybe not good carcass management can lead to problems like that. And when you start, now this was, I must say, the perfect wolf pack because they never predated on any livestock. We had all the scat tested and we were trying to see what they were actually eating, and it was deer and elk, and the pups had a lot of grasshoppers and things like that. So I would say it was a good wolf pack, but they can switch very quickly and it can become a conflict in a real short time if they couldn't get enough wild game. So sort of the problems got invited in due to our carcass management program. So the other thing is just to show you the proximity. That is my barn there where these wolves were like honestly in the middle of the ranch. I think from where the barn is to where this picture was taken is maybe 300-400 meters. The wolves were really comfortable there, very happy there. We had cows calving on the right-hand side. We had sheep to the left here, and here we are with this massive pack of hungry mouths that needed feeding. So that's a little bit of the story of what happened there. As I said, we had no predation problems at this point, but it doesn't mean to say it wouldn't have happened, it couldn't have happened, and it could even happen years down the road. So one of the big things is carcasses are a major attractant, right? Like wildlife, studies have shown that wildlife can find a carcass in between hours and a couple of days. That is why that 7 days of removing a carcass is actually a little bit late. Predators would have found it at that time. Having like a dump site like that, having coyotes will come in, ravens come in, eagles come in, foxes, everything will come into that, that attractant. And if it's a regular thing, like if you have like regular deaths, lambs or whatever, they're going to stay there, right? They're going to be attracted to that place. Ravens are a great finder of carcasses. They squawk and make noises. Coyotes follow them in because the coyote will open the carcass for the raven so that they can peck in deeper. So there's a relationship there. Timing is crucial, like how long it takes for them to find it. Any type of carcasses or even carcasses or farm waste like grain spillage, things like that is an attractant, right? Bears will come in if you have a grain bag that's ripped open to eat the grain. Elk will come in if you bale graze in an elk area. Even though it's not a farm waste, you're inviting wildlife in onto your farm because they're getting a free meal. And once they've been invited in, it's very hard for them to be uninvited and be sent back out. So we have a lot of elk issues, so we have to put our hay bales behind 10-foot high elk fencing, right? Swath grazing for us is not an option. Bale grazing is not an option. Our elk herd is as big as our cow herd, so it's not going to work for us. People that use grain bags, bears will get in them, birds will pick at it, you start getting spillage. Then as soon as you have that kind of free food source, that is where your problems are going to start, because the bear might start on your grain, but if you happen to have a dead calf at the same time, you'll go and scavenge on the calf as well. And you know, you're making things a little easier. So we want to be careful about giving out free meals, put it that way. So you sort of get patterns happening. So if you have, for example, spilled grain or hay in the fields or whatever, it invites the elk and the deer in. Wolves like to follow elk and deer. If you have carcasses, then you end up with conflict. So that is sort of not the circle of life, but that's kind of how it goes. And we just have to see what can we control. The only thing we really can control is where you feed and what you do and what you can do there. The rest, you have no control of. You can't control where that wolf is and what he's doing. You can't control what the elk and the deer are doing. So the only thing you have in your hands is what the feed, how you feed, and your carcass management. And of course, when you lamb, when you calve, those kind of things. So what they found in a lot of studies, and these are studies taken worldwide, whether we're talking about predators in Africa, whether we're talking about dingoes in Australia, all over the world, doesn't matter what type of predator you have, as soon as you have carcasses in open areas, your chances of getting predation issues increase significantly, not just a little bit, significantly. So that is why one of the main things with wildlife management is you need to get rid of that carcass, right? You need to, if you are calving in a field and you're leaving dead lambs out for your guardian dogs to eat, you're not only teaching the guardian dog bad habits, but you're inviting those predators in. That coyote will come in and take that lamb, or a fox will take that lamb. And it starts off with a lot of predators. They actually don't start off because they sort of imprint on natural prey. So a wolf will teach its pups that elk are its main menu, or deer are the main menu, or whatever, calves are the main menu. They learn to switch species and what they like to eat through predation, through scavenging, through carcasses. So for example, the wolves in our area, we pretty much the only sheep farmer for a long time in that area. Wolves never realized that sheep can be on the menu. When you start putting carcasses out there and they start eating on it, they learn that, oh, you know, if we can get through that wool layer, there's meat under there and we can eat it. So, you know, most predation starts by the predator learning on carcasses that it's an edible and available food supply. And that switch from going from a carcass to a live animal is really easy for them to learn. So that is something like, if you're lambing in an area, clean up if you can your afterbirths, clean up your dead lambs, clean up what you can, because otherwise you're causing that attractant to be there. So my guardian dogs will actually guard a carcass for a few days. They will chase ravens off it. They will lay at that carcass if I don't clean it up. My dogs kind of look at me as if to say, you know, well, you know, I'll lay here, but you need to get rid of it. If I don't, eventually they'll leave it behind and carry on with their thing. But for the first few days, they will chase any raven, whatever, away from it. I don't like having dead animals. I go to lots of sheep farmers, and I'm sorry to say they leave their carcasses out in the field, and it drives me nuts, because I think, you know, they're the ones that are often complaining then because of coyotes coming in and eating their sheep. So clean up your dead stock. Don't leave it up to your dogs to clean up. That's never a good policy. So this is a natural, this is like, yeah, of course I can figure that out. The more carcasses you have, the more predators you're going to have. What happens is you concentrate predators in your area, because a predator is, I mean, they want an easy and a cheap food source, so they're going to come in. If they can eat from, let's say, a dead cow for a week, they're going to be staying around, hanging around your farm. They're not going to go and look for that deer somewhere in, you know, the Swan Hills to go and hunt. They're just going to hang around, stay around your place, things like that. So there's a very tight correlation. It's a very logical correlation. So just some timing and predator visitation. So this is just what I spoke a little bit about earlier, that you want to just reduce that risk, get those carcasses out of the way. Now, we have to be practical. Not everyone can take a carcass to a rendering facility or to a landfill or whatever. It might have to be an on-farm disposal, but at least take it out of the field where that animal died in. So at least you're lowering the chance of the predators coming into your calving field, into your lambing fields, get them at least further away than what they need to be. There has been a study done on bears that if they've eaten a carcass on your farm, that same bear has been coming back to that site for up to 8 years later to see if there's a carcass there. That's also why sometimes moving your sites of where you put like on-ground disposal in different areas, they will come and investigate that same site, that same place. Coyotes will trot through, go and see, oh, is there something here? Is there not something? So they have a really good memory of where they had easy food to get. So that is important to remember. So we're just going to look at some of the effects of carcass removal. This is just a graph, but I've actually got it all nicely written out. So they found in Spain on cattle, wolf predation on calves declined 25 to 40% after carcass ban. So carcass bans means leaving it out in the field, right? So you have to dispose of it. In Montana, calf losses to wolves and grizzlies fell by 50% if you take your carcass, remove your carcass from that area. In Alberta, Waterton, 30 to 40%. And these numbers are pretty consistent all over the world. If you just the act of removing that carcass from the field can reduce your chance of predation by half. It's not the only thing. I'm not saying if you just do this, that you'll never get predated on, but this is a really good place to start to prevent that conflict. And on sheep, pretty much the same kind of numbers, 60% here, 40% there, 30, 50. So I would say on average about 50% of reduction on predation by just removing the carcass. So that's the easiest place to start in trying to maintain that conflict between predators and livestock. So what is good for one is good for all. So what they found in a research is if you kill wolves to prevent predation on your farm, it might protect your farm, but it might be bad for your neighbor in that they might move to your neighbor's land. And that's the same story with carcasses. If you put your dead carcasses at your neighbor's place, he might suffer the problems of conflict and predation, things like that. So, you know, if you have like my neighbor who dumps her dead horse in the county ditch, that's not being a good neighbor. You need to look at good community solutions. So that is where all the regulations come in. You've got to be so far from this boundary and that so far from that. But, you know, if you are a good neighbor, you make sure that your carcasses are dealt with in such a way that your neighbor is not going to have problems with it, right? So just work on things. And community solutions can be really successful because if you look at it, like there've been massive promotions in BC on bear smart programs, right? Because bears are, of course, a big issue there. Cleaning up garbage dumps, not leaving stuff out that they can scavenge on, having the bins that that bears can't open. Those are community solutions, right? It's, you know, if we all work a little bit together, we can actually prevent possible issues, not just with livestock predation, but safety issues. If your kids are waiting for a bus and the bear comes along, things like that. Cleaning up fallen fruit programs, do not feed wildlife. I know Fish and Wildlife spend the majority of their time dealing with like calls of like, there's a coyote in this park and he's threatening me because people go and have picnics and they're throwing food out for the coyotes. The coyotes get more aggressive, start approaching people. So you get a conflict there. I think you read everywhere, a fed bear is a dead bear. We want to make sure that any food sources, whether it's from carcasses, any other grain, whatever it is, that you try and minimize it because as soon as you can clean it up, get it away, you're going to have less issues with predators. So it's not just what's good for your farm, it's also what's good for the community as a whole. So there are different programs. You discussed it, so I'm not even going to touch on this slide. But in southwestern Alberta, they ran a program and they took out like, I don't know, 5,800 carcasses. And the numbers from that showed a definite reduction in carnivore conflict and also to the producers' costs. So, of course, there's a gold standard. The gold standard, if you could remove carcasses in a perfect world, you know, do it the best you possibly can. But sometimes we just don't have those options. So there's good, better, and best. I think using things like that is just a good idea. But, you know, as long as you're taking it, for, number one, out of the field, putting it in an area that's maybe more remote on your farm, not having a problem, that's the first place to start. If you can compost or bury it, maybe even better. If you clean up the bones, if you're having an like an on-ground system, do that. So just, you know, try and improve those management practices as best as possible. So let's just look at some dynamics between predators and carcasses. Just let me think. I think I skipped a slide here. No. So as I said, carcasses are a reliable food source for them. It's like subsidizing. It's like the wolf is standing there with a hand out like, feed me, feed me. So what happens is as soon as you have that, you get higher predator densities in that location, and they stop wanting to go and find like wild game. They get lazy, right? And what happens is if they can come and just eat on carcasses that are easily and readily available, they tend to have increased litter sizes because they don't have to run around and find their food. They have to work harder for it. And the survival rate of those pups, so those 7 wolf pups that were born on our ranch, 7 survived. Where if that wolf pack was maybe in the Swan Hills, maybe only 2 pups would have survived. So you're artificially keeping them concentrated on your ranch. If you don't clean up those predators, the chance of pup survival is higher, and that is across the board, whether it's a wolf or a coyote, whatever. So, you know, there's definitely correlations between the two. And, you know, maybe the people that have the most predator issues are not managing their carcasses well enough. I'm not saying it is, but it could be, and that could be the correlation there. Some farmers never get predated on, other farmers get predated on all the time. What is the difference? What is happening there? So what we've seen, coyotes have higher pup survival, larger litters near carcass dumps. Wolves sustain larger packs, delayed dispersal. So young wolves disperse usually at an age of about 1.5 to 2. They go and find a new place to live in a pack. They delay that. So you're having bigger packs, older animals staying longer on that area. Bears, of course, they have a better body condition closer to farms than they do out in the backcountry. Higher survival, inflated local density. So, you know, if you look at that, then you can see how feeding them unintentionally is actually creating additional problems, potential for problems. So I discussed about how they revisit carcass sites. Most predators learn to eat livestock through scavenging. I spoke about the imprinting on natural food sources, but how that can quickly change. The other issue that tends to happen, so habituation happens. So if you have livestock and you have a lot of predators in your area, your livestock actually get used to it and they stop being worried or overly alert to what's going on. And if you see here, this is a perfect example. Look how close that coyote is to that sheep. The sheep are completely unconcerned. They're just happily grazing there, like they don't care about it. If you watch wildlife videos and you're in Africa and there's a drinking pond, you'll see lions drinking right next to zebra because they kind of have to at that situation at the water pool. But a certain habituation occurs. The predators get used to being comfortable close to your livestock, and the livestock get used to predators going through them, which is not always a good situation. You kind of want the livestock to be alert, like, hey, the mama cow's got to get her calf up and we're going to watch that wolf walk past. You want that kind of interaction. You don't want the cow to think, it's just another wolf, right? You want them to be focused on what's going on. And then that feedback loop of just, you know, you keep feeding them dead carcasses, they keep staying there. It just is a circle that goes around and round. So we talked about the artificially inflated populations. You also see around carcass dump sites that you tend to get a higher proportion of mesopredators. So your wolves are like your apex predators, but around carcass sites, you often see a lot of your smaller scavengers. So you'll see more foxes, more coyotes, more weasels, you know, your smaller predators. You seem to see a little bit more of an explosion of those kind of predators. So if you are a chicken farm, foxes and coyotes might be more of a problem than the wolf, right? So having those sites is you're inviting those smaller predators in on that. And it's a really interesting dynamic. We see it at our place. So if I have a old carcass, you'll see, for example, a coyote come in and you'll poop there, and a fox will come and poop like a little higher, and they're trying like outweigh each other in dominance a little bit there. So I believe the best way, and it maybe isn't the best way, but I do believe the best way to dispose of carcasses is through composting. A sheep can disappear in a well-made compost pile in 3-4 days. A cow might take a little bit longer. You might be left with a few hard bones that you need to go out, but it is cheap, it's effective, it's super doable. Every farm can actually do it. And it doesn't have to be super fancy. It doesn't have to be a composting facility. So what we do, none of these photos are mine, but what we do is we clean out, we've got a big barn, we clean out a barn, our corrals, we make a compost pile there. We have it in a place that we can manage it, so we can turn it a couple of times a year to get some oxygen in there. We just take the grapple and the bucket of a tractor, dig a hole into it, put your sheep or your calf or whatever it is in there, cover it up. And we dig them up just experimentally to see how long it takes, but honestly, it goes really quickly. If you want to be a little bit like the good, better, best, that is like the minimum. If you want to be better, put a fence around it. Put an electric fence on so no other predators can come in. If you can cover the top to stop ravens coming in, great. If your compost pile is big enough, they generally won't dig it up. But you know, you can, like, it's so doable. You can manage it and, you know, keep it away, of course, from water sources and things like that, because there will be leaching carrying on. But I think it is the most beneficial form of carcass disposal on a farm that every farmer can do. Like, we pretty much all have a tractor or a bucket. We can't always bury in the winter. On ground, I mean, in the winter it'll work, but you could see all the other problems that come with it. This really is the best. I'm going to show you, I think it's like a 1 or 2 minute YouTube film on making a compost pile. And I think that is, just gives you an idea. I don't know if mine will work here. Do you want to see if it is finding it here, trying to find it? If not, write down the, or take a picture of the URL and you can look it up yourself. So I wasn't sure if it would just go there. Thank goodness you're here for the technology part. And I'm not sure if this is even like, I don't even think it's an Alberta thing, but it's just really simple to see. So it's in, no, just start here. I don't know if they sound. So your base material is just your organic matter at the bottom.
Put the base material between the perimeter of the carcass and the edge of the base. In composting ruminants, especially cattle, puncture the rumen to prevent it from exploding. Cover the carcass with 8 to 10 inches of bulky material. Cover the entire pile of a long row with 2 feet of cover material. Make sure the pile always has sufficient cover material. Turn the pile every 6 months from early spring to late fall.
The carcass will be long gone by then.
Existing compost can be used covered pile.
And that's it. It's literally that simple to make. If you want to get me back there. how to make a good disposable facility, slap up some panels around it and electric fence around it, and you probably have your best system for getting rid of carcasses on farm. So I thought I'd just show it because it's just so simple. People often think, you know, you have to do this and you have to do that and a whole lot of facilities, and that is just not what is needed. Thank you. So key takeaways, we've done this all already. And you can all read faster than what I can talk. This is the government key takeaways. So, you know, why it's important, and, you know, it's good for the industry, it's good for the environment, things like that. So there are different takeaways, what the government wants and what we need to do on farms. So yeah, that was my presentation. So if you have any questions, I'd love to answer them. And if you have questions beyond just the carcass part, but about other wildlife conflict, I'll be happy to answer them.
Oh, I have a question myself. We have sheep at home, and our like manure was very dry. So I think like kind of our compost pile wasn't wet enough. Any recommendations? Because
So-
it didn't decompose that well with us.
Okay.
Because it was just, yeah, we had
Yeah,
such
so one
dry.
of the things we do is like when we even clean our outside pens, we pile it, right? And you get that manure and dirt and old bedding packs from the animals. I think that is important. Sometimes if you can dig a hole and then make your compost pile in the hole will collect some moisture, things like that. Yeah, if you're going to just put just dry straw on, it's just going to naturally decompose, and you need the heat from the compost. And that's why they say you need to turn the piles to get that oxygen in there, otherwise it becomes anaerobic. But you need the heat from the manure actually. So you need some manure in there where you can find it. So we lamb in an indoor barn in the winter. So by spring, I usually have a pile, but I make sure we spread our manure every year. When I go into winter, I make sure I have a base start. Because we're lambing in January and I know I'm going to have dead animals then. And otherwise they freeze like during the night, and then you put them in a dry compost, they're just going to be there next spring again, right? You're going to deal with them twice. So having the heat from the manure that the composting process uses is actually what helps it degrade. So you kind of need to create that base if you don't have it naturally. If you're always grazing in a field, you're not going to have manure to be able to put together. But if you can grab a couple of bucketfuls from a neighbor or, you know, from some corrals somewhere, try and stockpile it and create that base if needs be.
Because do you keep, I guess, a separate compost pile beside your manure pile? Like you have a manure pile and then, or is that kind of?
It's the same. The only thing is when our guy comes and spreads it, he knows that now and then there'll be bones. And when he's spread a field, we usually drive over the field with a tractor to go and pick up any bones because we don't want them back in the hay bales or whatever. But really, we don't have a lot of, unless you have like an incident like we did, like the big bones of a cow are easy to pick up in a field once you spread it. The sheep bones pretty much disintegrate, like they're softer bones. If you can leave it in a pile long enough, those bones will just fall away. But it would be the same if you put like in the back 40 and dump the carcass on land. You're going to have bones, and the coyotes are going to drag them into your hay field, and you're going to find them in any case, whether they come through your manure pile or on the ground, you're going to find them, right? So you're going to have to clean them up one way or another. I think it's just those big old 5-6-year-old bulls with like femurs that are this size and heads like this, they might be the harder ones, but they're big enough, you can find them. So there's not really an issue there. Chickens, like what you were talking about, they're going to be gone in 2 days in a manure pile. So honestly, I don't even think it would be a problem for like on land predators. Yeah, it's more your birds, but birds aren't going to go digging this deep in a manure pile to find that chicken head, right? So I think you can get away with a lot with a well-constructed compost pile.
And what do you do with your bones?
With my bones, I actually take them to the landfill. Yeah. I have been thinking maybe to dig a hole and bury just the big old bones that are left. But at this stage, I just take them to the landfill. I think, you know, in a perfect world, you never have dead stock, but you know, you do. And yeah, sometimes, and now and then my dogs will bring a bone home and, you know, take it from the dog and goes to the dump, like the spine and think the ribs, they just disappear. So.
Have you found adding different material to compost, like wood chips, or have you just strictly done manure and straw?
I've done manure and straw and like a rotten old hay bale and things like that. I just feel if you have it, right, rather than importing something, because nobody wants to deal with dead animals, especially not a 3-day-old dead animal, right? It's already almost exploding and it stinks bad. You just want to get rid of it as soon as possible. So offering that solution to the farm of just use what you have, material what you have, you know, that rotten core of a bale that's been sitting on the edge of the bush that you never ever took out, go and pick it up. It's a great start for that base. So, you know, nobody's going to load up their dead cow and drive 50 kilometers. They're just not going to do it. So there has to be a little bit of realism here. What can we do? And, you know, if dumping it on land in the middle of the winter is your only solution, then find the best spot as far away from your fields as you possibly can, because your hands are tied at that moment. So, I mean, do what you can, but just realize if you do better, your chances of conflict are a whole lot less, and even conflict with your neighbors, because nobody wants to see your dead cow. My first picture, the legs up in the air, just about exploding rumen. Nobody wants to deal with that. So, you know, that's where being a good neighbor comes in handy.
I got a question.
Sure.
We have a real bad problem with coyotes on our place.
Yeah.
We don't have no animals that are dead or anything, but they've taken down a year and a half, 2 years ago, they took down a 500-pound cat.
Yeah.
How can we get rid of these coyotes so they're not?
Import a wolf pack. That's your solution. Bring in some wolves and the coyotes will leave. Yeah.
Get everything, and it
Yeah.
seems like the coyotes are to a point now, I have to hire a coyote guy to come in and blast them all, and we're still around.
Yeah. So what?
They're walking among, like, even when I'm feeding cows in the day, they're walking around the cows and the cows don't even.
They get used to them, right? And they don't really care. But what you see happening with predators is, for example, take England that have eradicated wolves many years ago. Their foxes are super aggressive, way more aggressive than the foxes here in Canada. Here in Canada, they'll take a chicken and, you know, kind of be done with it. Like I have some foxes in the yard, they won't even look at a lamb, right? But in England, they become apex predators, right? They fill those gaps higher up. So if your coyotes are that aggressive, they haven't got competition of bigger predators in their immediate area, right? Because I can tell you, we can hear when our wolf pack is close by, the coyotes don't yip and howl, they disappear because the wolves will put pressure on the coyotes. But to get back to your solution, you know, coyotes are a little bit hard because they're responsive breeders. So what happens is the more you hunt them, the more they breed, the more pups they raise, you keep that cycle going. You almost have to leave them alone, give them like lack of feed pressure so that they're not raising so many pups, things like that. But how do you do it? If you're in an area with abundant fawns and a lot of rabbits and other game, they're going to stay around, right? So it's kind of a hard situation there. I think one of the ways we do it is electric fencing. Electric fencing, livestock guardian dogs. Yeah. Sometimes if you have a real bad coyote, she just does need to be taken out. But
the first time they shot, they took out 11.
Yeah.
And now there's
and then you get a vacuum, and then a new coyote comes along and says, hey, there's so much food here, it's so easy, I'm going to stay here, right? So it's almost like a self-perpetuating system. Pressure is pretty much the only way.
A cow had a calf and it went under the fence, and by the time we got to it, coyotes got it.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Well,
I don't know how to eradicate this problem. It's just driving us completely bonkers.
Well, and I also know with coyotes, like because the Alberta government doesn't do anything regarding coyotes in compensation and things like that. But I mean, look at it. Saskatchewan put out a coyote bounty a few years ago. They killed 78,000 coyotes, and the number of predation incidences did not go down. It went down the first year, and then after that, it just reset up. So, you know, I think there's a bit of an issue there. I do find, like, we have our guardian dogs in with our cows when they're calving. We went from an April lambing to a January lambing, so those young lambs are protected inside. So we've had to adjust our management, because we can't control what the coyotes are doing, to sort of work for us. And it's worked out better for us, because having them in January, I mean, all you're doing in the winter is sitting in your house. I mean, not feeding a few cows, and that's, you might as well be busy and lamb some sheep out. But, you know, adjusting that management. We had a coyote for a few years, and she was a bad coyote. She'd come in and like predate on the sheep and kill the sheep and things like that. And she's seems to have moved on. We haven't had any issues the last few years. So, you know, sometimes it's just they teach their pups and the young, you need like a different generation coming in, but there's not a like silver bullet answer to that. But you have to do it, but you have to do everything.
These coyotes now, they kind of merged to not being a normal coyote. They kind of got a little bit of the guy that shot them. He says they got wolf.
Yeah,
So
could be.
they're very aggressive.
Yeah. Well,
definitely, they're not. They're either crossed.
So they really are, they've taken over that role on your place as an apex predator, but they're going to keep that going. So really it is 100% like carcass management, keeping them away from those fields, keeping them out, getting the right coyotes. You can shoot 11 coyotes, but if you're shooting the wrong coyotes, you might not be solving the problem, because they'll still be teaching the others.
It's just to a point.
But you can go to Fish and Wildlife, and they can, under circumstances, give you like some kind of poison that you can control, but that's a conversation that you have with Fish and Wildlife, right? Well, then you're going to have to lock up your dogs, right?
Not to do that, because then you kill all their dogs.
Exactly. That is the risk that you take, and it's a hard problem, right? So,
Okay.
any other questions? Anything else about conflict with wildlife, or no? Well, I appreciate your attention and your time, and thank you for coming. I'll leave you to switch it off.
Yeah, thank you all for coming. Also those that joined online. I just put a small survey out there. If you can let us know what you thought about the event, that would be great. And it has been a very informative morning, I think. So we will be sharing the recording and some other information. Yeah, you can always contact Farming Forward if you have any questions, and we can bring you in further contact if we don't know the answer. And thank you all.